This is Tim Staten and Stating the Obvious, where we make sense of leadership principles and turn them into relatable everyday actions that could enhance or improve your leadership style. The last couple of weeks, we've been talking about team building and ways to go about building effective teams that achieve high results. So the first foundational level of team building we talked was trust. You have to have trust amongst each other in order to cohesively build a team together. Then the second topic we talked about was having healthy conflict. And those two go hand in hand, because if you have a good solid foundational level of trust, then you can move on into knowing that everybody is there looking for the best results out of the team, and it can drive some healthy conflict and flush out bad ideas from good ideas and leads into higher levels, which brings me into the third topic in this series of team building, which is commitment to the team, buy-in to the team. So have you ever worked somewhere and you were only there because it temporarily filled in a need that you had, but you weren't committed to the overall vision or mission of the team or the organization or the company? I know I've been there in some of my previous jobs before this one. So as an employee, if I've been there, then I know as a leader, I have employees who feel the same way or felt the same way that I did in the past because they needed a job, but they weren't really committed to the overall team. And in fact, they probably weren't even committed to the overall vision or mission of the organization. They were just there to, comply with what they had to comply in order to, get a paycheck at the end of the day. But the key question is, how do we get people to commit and buy in? And in this episode, that's what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about commitment versus compliance. This is the part where I take a break from talking and making a couple of plugs and ask a few things of you. First, I want to thank you for those of you who are listening to this podcast regularly and sharing it with your friends and family. That is a huge, huge blessing and help for us. And I would like to ask this week that you continue to share this podcast with one or two people that you might think that would like it. So if you want to share it with them, you got a couple options. You can look it up on podbean.com. You can look at iTunes or the Google Play Store. Facebook is another location where we share our ideas, and we also post episodes on there. So if someone's like, well, I don't know how to get to the iTunes store and look for it, or I don't know how to get to Podbean. Most people have a Facebook, so you can share it on Facebook and say, hey, this is the podcast I was telling you about. And that gives them another venue to take a look at it. Then they can click on the links there for iTunes and Podbean as well. So thank you for your support of this podcast and listening to us regularly and sharing it with one or two other people this week. From my experience, there are two types of employees. Those that don't know how to commit to the team because of a lack of clarity, or those that need more coaching to gain commitment. This is commitment versus compliance. So when we talk about the second one, and I'm going to talk about the second one first, because those people need more coaching. They're there for their needs to be met and not there because they want to serve the greater organization. So at first glance, a leader might go, wait a second. So they're there because they want their needs fulfilled. So that's great. That means I can use that motivation of, for their selfishness to get the best work out of them. But that's not going to get you the higher levels of commitment to the team for the person on their left or the person on their right, to make sure that everybody is doing what they should be doing fairly and equally. Some people might kind of do a little bit like we talked about last week when we have the guy who's going to play it safe. So this is the guy who's going to play it safe. He's there because he wants to get his needs met. So when we take a look at how can we move them out of compliance to, I am going to do the procedural things that I got to do every single day and nothing more and nothing less, to how do I can get him out of compliance and into commitment to buy into the team and say, hey, you know what? I'm actually here and I'm glad I'm here, but I want to do more than I'm supposed to because I'm bought into the team. In order to do that for these people, you have to show them how it benefits them first. And this is a weaker level of compliancy. What I mean by that is that compliancy is the lowest level of commitment to anything, right? So that means I'm only going to do what I'm supposed to do because of you're going to do something for me. So when you show them the benefits that they have of buying into the team and the long-term benefits it's going to have for them, the greater increase of efficiencies you can gain with them over a period of time. Now, they're going to need constant supervision. They're going to need course correcting because you're going to have to coach them into compliance, to commitment, so they can buy into the team. And I say that because no matter who you are, whether you're the second person where you're just like, hey, I'm here and I'm going to be compliant and I'm going towards full in commitment. And that's where you're going to have to tell people what success looks like, right? So we go into the first type of employees we talked about, which are those that don't know how to commit to the team because they are not really clear on what's expected of them or clear how to buy into the team. That's when you get those people who are in the compliance mode. Everybody gets on this, right? So the first thing that I think we should do is explain what success looks like. Then we've got to be clear about what our organization does. And answer the following questions. There's 6 imperative questions that we need to have people ask. Why does our organization exist? 2, what behaviors and values are essential? 3, what specifically is it that we do? And you might think, well, that kind of goes into the first one, is why our organization exists. And I'm going to kind of break this down into what I do in a little bit when we get into the real world application piece. But the fourth thing that we need to ask people is what success looks like. So we explained what overall success looks like for the organization, but now we narrow it down to individual success. So with individual successes, we can expand upon that and have collective successes. Then the fifth question is who must do what and when must they do it, right? So sometimes when people are committed to the team, they think, well, I gotta do something more because I see another teammate over here struggling, and that might not be the right thing. So we have to explain to people who's got to do what and when they have to do it to keep people rowing in the same direction or keep people on glide path. And then the last thing, the sixth question, and the last one is, are we doing the right things at the right time? I'm constantly asking myself this question every single day, because no matter what you're doing in your job or where you are in your career, if you're a leader, there's a million things that you got to do on a daily basis. And you have to take a step back sometimes and you have to go, are we doing the right thing? And is this the right time to be doing it? And if it's not, then that's how, we need to guide people into a different approach. So that's the theory behind what we're going to talk about into the real world application of gaining commitment to the team. So what I typically do is I sit all new employees down and I have a candid conversation with them. Some people call it initial counseling or feedback sessions. I calling it, this is my view and philosophy as a leader, and this is what the organization expects of you. And so what we do is I sit them down and I go over everything we just talked about. And I said, I try to find out why they're here as a part of the team. Everybody is there for different reasons. I try to find out their why, right? And so that was a different podcast episode that we talked about, is what's your why and how do you get after it. So I try to find out their why. And then after I find out their why, I tailor this initial counseling to go over to them and say, hey, look, this is what the organizational success looks like over the next year. And over the next 90 days, these are the things that I need you to focus on, because this is what is going to get the team better results. When I go into why our organization exists, I clearly explain to them that. I tell them, hey, the reason why we're here is for X, Y, and Z. Nobody else in this organization does what we do. We provide that professional service to the greater organization. We're just a subset of that. So we need to make sure that we're providing the highest quality service, because that's what our customers deserve. And then I tell them, these are the essential behaviors and values of our team. What you got to look like. And what I mean by what you got to look like is you got to be presentable. Not all people go into that. And I talk about what that means to me personally and then professionally. We talk about values. So you have organizational values and you have personal values. And I explain to them very clearly that if your personal values are different than our organizational values, over time, that's going to flush itself out. But what I need you to do is focus on aligning your internal values with the organization's values, so that way we can get along better and everyone is moving towards the same goals the same way. And then after we talk about that, I say, hey, look, this is what I need you specifically to do. This is your roles. These are your responsibilities. And then I use this word called discipline initiative, which means, I'm going to explain this a little bit more in detail because it can be confusing, because you're like, discipline initiative. How do you have discipline initiative? Well, it's pretty simple. I trust you so much right now, which goes into the first foundational level that we talked about. So as I get to know you, that trust is going to grow. So your left and your right limits are going to grow with that too. So what I expect you to do is do everything within your realm and cover it. So if it's something that you're supposed to be responsible for, I expect it to get done within that realm. And then as I see your initiative and your commitment to the team grow, then that will grow as well. Then I explain to them, this is what individual success looks like for you, and that's tied to the greater organizational success. And so that way I tell them, take this back to your reports and explain to them how their individual successes tie into your successes. So that way everybody is supporting the same message, the same themes, and the same ideas and goals along the way, from the very junior person to the organization to the most senior person in the organization, because we've clearly identified what success looks like. So I also tell them, I don't want you to get bogged down on trying to do more than what is considered success. If it naturally happens, that's fine. But that goes back into who must do what and when. Because if you're trying to do more than you're supposed to do and somebody else isn't carrying their weight on the team, then that's going to bog down and desynchronize the entire organization. So we got to make sure that you're committed to your individual team and the greater team by staying in your lane and doing what you're supposed to do and when you're supposed to do it, because what you do is tied to somebody else's job or actions or follow-on tasks, 2, 3, 4 months from now or 1 or 2 years from now. So that's why it's critically important to do it when you're supposed to do it. And then I also explained to them about how are we doing the right things at the right time. And I asked them to do the same thing. So that if I ever ask you to do something and you kind of are like, wait a second, if I do that, it's going to derail all these other things that we're doing. I expect you to provide that bottom-up feedback on that, right? Because if you don't provide that bottom-up feedback, then you're just in compliance mode. You're not committed to the overall success of the team, and you're just doing what you were told to do because you're like, well, my boss told me to do it, so I'm going to do it. But the right thing could do would be to take a step back and go, hey, I understand what you're trying to ask me to do. Do you really want to do it at the cost of all these other things? And then that shows that you're committed to the team and committed to the overall success, because you understand what must be done and when. You know what success looks like. You know what you're supposed to do. You know how you're supposed to act, and you know why your organization exists. That all of that combined goes into commitment to the team. And that's at a very, very basic level of what you can do initially to help set that foundation of when you're building your team and explaining to people how they could buy into the team. Now, the hard part is keeping that organizational clarity going and moving once it starts, right? So what I typically do is I have a quad chart of which I have all those areas of organizational clarity, and I evaluate where we are organizationally. And if we're struggling in one area versus another area, I explain that when I do my follow-on counseling sessions with individuals, and I let them know, hey, I think we're struggling in this area and I think we need to improve it, because we have people who are the most junior in our organization who don't understand the overall impact. And that way we're constantly feeding each other. We're constantly, holding each other accountable, which I'll go into accountability later in our next episode. But if you're not committed, then you can't hold anyone, accountable because they're not committed. After we do this initial counseling, I tell them, hey, look, we're going to take 30 days. I want you to think about what we talked about, and then I want you to tell me how you are committed to the team and how you're going to tie in based on this conversation, right? So what that does is it gives them 30 days to evaluate themselves, assess their team, their individual teams as they connect to the greater teams, look at time and space and see where we can make adjustments along the way. So as a leader, that is my background feed check on what they're doing. So then it's like, okay, I know that they're committed to the team. If they just come back with these are the tasks that I got to get done, I know that they're in compliance mode. I know that they're not really committed until over a period of time where I can get them from compliance and show them how commitment is more beneficial to them later on down the road. So when we take a look at this, you always want to look for initial commitment to the team versus compliance to the team. And if somebody comes in and they notice that there's, good trust amongst each other in the organization, there's a healthy level of conflict, like they just want to show up to work because they know, hey, something juicy might go down today. But in a good way, and they're not bored and it's not mundane. If they take a look at that initially on a foundational level and they go, hey, this might be a team that I want to be committed to, their quality of work is going to be at a higher level because they don't want to let anybody else on the team down versus if, they're just there to be compliant. So I want to thank you for listening to today's episode of Tim Stating the Obvious, where we talked about developing commitment in teams. And it's good to have that when we're building teams. I would like to ask one thing of you if I could. Please subscribe, comment, and share this podcast. I would love to read some more comments. I would love to get more feedback so we can generate a discussion. It's not about me sitting behind a microphone and just talking just to be talking. I can do that all day long, but I really generated this platform so we can have a discussion. So that's why I'm putting this out there. So I'm interested in your experiences and your stories, and so that we can share that with other listeners and they can glean some insights and get some fresh perspective that they might not have thought about before. So you can share in a couple of ways. One, I'm putting our Facebook page out there. It's Tim Stating the Obvious. Take it, put it in the search bar in Facebook. That is a good place so we can generate a discussion and feedback. You can go to the Podbean account. You can go to iTunes or the Google Play Store, and you can engage in comments there, and I will respond back. I also want to share with you that on September 11th, I'm doing another YouTube live session with Bobby Withers. He's a longtime friend of mine, but he's also a very, very staunch volunteer. And he's going to talk about volunteer leadership from a different perspective than we talked about with Dr. Nate Staten. So tune into that YouTube episode when we go live on that one. So we're going to have the chat up so we can get feedback from you so you can be a part of the conversation as well. I really hope that you enjoyed this episode and come back for another one. I'm Tim Staten, stating the obvious.